this right here is an article from a digital banker. I'm not going to get into all of it because it's a really, really long article. And to be honest, I just don't want to bore you with all the minor details. One thing I do want to point out, though, is this statement right here. I've blown it up as much as I can just to kind of put some emphasis on this. It talks about this right here about Citi. And we've, of course, made the connection with Citi. We've talked about quite a few things in regards to Citi, JP Morgan. We talked about this right here, MAS, Project Guardian, all these things, right? So bottom line is this, we talk about RLN, that particular network. Look what it says. Citi has just announced the development of an on-chain FX solution under Project Guardian. What tangible value are you looking to realize through blockchain-based FX trade transactions? Also, when can we expect the application to be rolled out to institutional clients? Now, you may be thinking, who are they talking to here? Well, it's this guy that's featured in the article, and his name is Shobhit Mani, and he states this. He says, as he's mentioned in his announcement, there are many proof points that demonstrate the impact of blockchain on driving post-trade efficiencies, but not many for conducting pre-trade and execution phases of a trade life cycle using this tech while retaining critical features such as limiting trading with authorizing counterparties, capital efficiencies, maintain privacy of data. You love how that's mentioned for all the people that may be doubting your JASMY. That's okay. But it says associated with trade quotes and pricing competitiveness. The majority of our current trading with clients is bilateral, and we wanted to explore the feasibility of conducting such trades over blockchain. Earlier this year, referring of course to, 2023, they issued a report that estimated that 10 trillion worth of assets. Did I catch your attention? I hope I did. 10 trillion of assets could exist on blockchain by 2030. Now, I just want to state this. When I see any statement about $10 trillion of assets, especially if it's going to be tokenized assets, I immediately think of BlackRock because we know that they have $10 trillion worth of assets. Now, they might not put it all on, blockchain and so on, but it's still going to be significant. Hence why everybody's paying attention to the whole thing of, ETFs and so on, right? This other statement says to settle and trade these assets, new infrastructure. Think about this for a second. We understand the connections, but some people don't, and it's okay. New infrastructure may be required. What infrastructure do you really think that is? The main benefit demonstrated in the solution was data immutability, as all quotes and executed trades are recorded on blockchain that enables real-time post-trade analysis, such as best execution analysis. Other potential benefits of blockchain not tested in the solution is that the front-to-back trade lifecycle can enable on a single infrastructure, reducing counterparty risk due to true PvP on much faster settlement cycles, possibly even near instantaneous. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's a guy who literally gave almost that exact same quote, and of course, it's the one and only Go Reverdian. Goes on to mention, we will continue to be led by client feedback to determine any useful addition features. This other statement is really good because it talks about this. It states, a case of parallel infrastructures mutually coexisting and reinforcing each other. Now, remember when we're talking about tonight's coverage for Stellar, especially when it comes to Sorbonne? Stellar always gets that great mention of your on and off ramps, recognizing the traditional financial sectors of the world and not dismissing them, but enabling them and enhancing them with, distributed ledger technologies and so on, blockchain tech and whatnot. The parallel infrastructures coexisting, reinforcing each other. This statement here is another thing I want to point out. It says, we think this technology, according to Shobhit Mani, as a meaningful component part of the broader digital transformation of financial services. We are on a 5 to 10 year journey where blockchain infrastructures will be deployed to solve most pressing problems rather than a full replacement of traditional rails. When I see statements like this, I understand that this is where Quant Papa is so bold and bullish on Quant, and maybe why he swapped his his XRP for Quant. I stated I'm not going to do that because I recognize that there's still going to be, the standout new payment rails where you're going to have like Stellar that's going to stand out, XRP is going to stand out. I want to be more diversified. I just don't want to be a maxi in one thing, but I get it. I totally get it because people see these statements of parallel infrastructures and mutually coexisting to reinforce each other. And if it does mutually coexist, then it's the whole concept of why you see, for instance, like what Quant does all over the world when it comes to fiat and also, what we got going on with this new monetary system, if you will. Now, this thing about the digital banker, you can read more about it if you choose to do so. Just in case, if you want the whole article, you're going to nerd it out. It's from the digitalbanker.com, and it's called An Exclusive Interview with Shobit Maney. He's the co-head of digital assets global markets from Citi. If you wonder who that is. Now, let's jump over to this because I didn't get to show this to you guys last time around. Because if anything, last time around, as in, before the 3-week break, excuse me, we were talking about many different things, but we never got a chance to get into this. And this is significant. All right. It says how to use Zapier and Overledger to trigger actions based on DLT activity. You know how it is, guys. I always talk about utility in motion. This is one of the best examples of utility in motion that I've seen lately. And I do feel as though it's a good thing to point out. It's not a nothing burger. I want to share this with you. So, Quant Papa got into all this. Let's give you guys a little background. This is from Cathal McFadden. He's a senior Ethereum developer. Listen to this for a second. He says combining Overledger and Zapier removes the need to host and maintain costly systems and in minutes create what would typically be a long-lasting or long-term development task. Now, according to Quant Papa, in his own notes, he got really into the nitty-gritty about some of this stuff. So, it talks about this right here about, I don't know if I could blow this up more. No, I can't. That's one thing I don't like about the Quant site. If you blow it up too much, then it's just like you can't see it too well on your screen. So I'll come out of the frame on this one. I want to put some emphasis on this. But look at this for a second. I'll take out the logo. It states right here, talks about how you can set up Overledger Zap. I know it sounds crazy. User set up an account-free trial. Talks about needing to do some of these requirements. But specifically, this whole thing of Overledger that triggers in Zapier for new account event, users can subscribe to a specific DLT address. Whenever the specified address is involved in a transaction, the Zap process, if you can imagine this, will begin automatically and deliver a notification via the chosen messaging service. Once the trigger is received in the Zap, users can perform subsequent actions using any of the thousands of existing actions available on the Zapier ecosystem, including all of the Overledger API actions. I'm going to come back in the frame on this one. Maybe thinking, I don't understand this. Why is that so significant? Can you put it more into layman's terms? Stop making it so Greek. What's significant about this compared to all the other ones of the past is basically this. You are now finally seeing an example confirmed straight from the Overledger, or I should say the Quant network site, quant.network, where things that were speculative is also now confirmed straight from their actual site. Because if anything, this, and I'll highlight it again, is this right here. Thousands of existing actions available in the Zapier ecosystem, including all of the Overledger API actions. With other projects, whether it's like, for instance, Oracle, it could be some, many other ones that we talked about. you could see the partnerships, but we would have to do things like connect the dots, if you will. You guys know me, I do these types of things. But this example confirms, like, when people say Overledger doesn't, it's not Overledger. You're just trying to connect some things, and then later on we find out, like, for instance, with the BIS, Bank of England, that they actually did go with the Overledger, right? They went with Quant Network. But when we talked about the whole things of, interoperability for everything, I get it, guys. You guys get tired of me talking about interoperability, but Quant, in reality, that's something that stands out. But we have talked about this whole thing of blanketing everything. This is the perfect example of it because, like I said, thousands of existing actions available in this ecosystem, including all of the Overledger API actions. So if you're finally starting to see things where thousands of existing actions are now confirmed, well, then that means basically that, for example, that this is something that is no longer an NDA. Maybe it was an NDA in the past. I don't know. But you love the idea of seeing confirmation instead of speculation. All right, getting more into this because it's a good little follow-up. Quant Papa took this screenshot, of course, from Quant Network. It states, monitoring blockchain activity, like it says, hopefully you see on the screen, improves both security and control over your assets by notifying you when funds are sent or received, just like we mentioned, right? Through Overledger, so on and so forth, right? Just another little highlight. I guess I just read that part. I mean, he wanted me to jump to this. I probably should have just done that. That's okay. Here's this guy again. Let's share this as well. Already read that. Cathal McFadden, senior ETH developer. Here's some background on this guy. This is from his particular resume, right? You guys are familiar with IN. And it basically mentions some of these things. So currently speaking, he's the senior blockchain engineer at Quant. And for instance, he's done, things with Solidity, blockchain node management. But look at this for a second. He was a senior blockchain engineer with Volzite back in October 2022. He was a blockchain software engineer over at Befristet, freelance software engineer over at Volzite. For about a couple years, senior software engineer and team leader over at Befristet, if I'm pronouncing that right. Solutions architect over at SSP, roughly about a year or so. And of course, like we talked about earlier with Oracle, right? He was a team leader and principal software engineer over there. Look at this for a second. Here he is. He's pictured over at Welcome to TechX Global 2023. Boom, right there. Just to kind of, I don't know, screenshots or didn't happen, right? Some gamers still say that. Look at this, Fintium. Remember how we talked about Fintium? Financial technology continued its advance in 2023, accompanied by deeper discussions for use cases, testing across the industry. But now we went from testing across the industry to, no problem, just thousands of APIs, all through Quant, not some, all. That's just nuts. We have collected some highlights over the past year, and we think that the impact for the intraday markets as we head into 2024. You guys remember some of this stuff? Remember we talked about institutional swaps? I don't know if you guys remember some of that stuff. Commercial bank payment initiatives progressed and gained increased traction. Listen to this. Finality International moved closer to production with his GBP Finality payment system to be launched first. And look at this. Remember all those talks that we had about Parsher? I think we did about 3 or 4 videos about that. More banks joined the Parsher payment network, including who? SBC Group and, of course, Deutsche Bank. But look at this. JP Morgan, as in JPM Coin, was also launched on Parsher. We already confirmed this a while back. JP Morgan Chase & Co. Coin Systems launched your payments to join its already live USD. This opens the possibility for fully tokenized FX transactions. And it's not included here, but we already confirmed this in the past. Institutional swaps. Check this out. Back to the whole topic of RLN. And again, you guys can go into the recorded video section if you never got we're, I should say, never caught up on this and so on. RLN is absolutely massive. Educate yourself why that's big, especially if you're a QNT holder. So, regulated liability network launched trials on both wholesale CBDCs and retail commercial bank money. You know about some of this stuff. BNY Mellon announced it will support intraday repo in its tri-party system. This one I'm not really familiar with, to be honest. Plan Assist launched its liquidity data insight solution. But look at this. Baton Systems launched its core payments product for throttling, also known as settlement orchestration. Look at this for a second. RTGS, because let's face all the big, content creators always talk about real-time gross settlements, especially when it comes to XRP. But Global completed its first instant settlement FX trade. So again, this whole notion that, and guys, this is not me fighting XRP. I love XRP. I love Stellar and all that, right? Diversified. But if people have it in their head that there is no way that we have real-time gross settlements with instant finality, and it's just exclusive to the likes of Ripple's XRP and so on, I hate to be the bearer of that news. You need to understand that with Overledger, it is more than meets the eye. It is the gateway of gateways, and if anything, it is the enabler for also real-time instant settlement, FX trade, and so on. You have, for instance, this Swyat, if I'm pronouncing that right, project by Deca Bank, of course. I guess also connected to Deutsche Bank. This is another division. Set to launch integration with Target 2 system, so payment confirmations go directly onto the interbank ledger. Don't ever dismiss Target 2, T2, if you've been studying this stuff, because if anything, you will understand the bigger picture of it's not just like, the whole thing with, for instance, Swift, ISO 222. Target 2 has always been right part of that mix, especially when it comes to what? Europe, right? Europe with Target 2. All right, more about this. Again, more notes from Quant Papa, screenshots, and so on. European Central Bank established a new technology for wholesale settlement. We know about some of this stuff. Maybe not the terminology as far as the abbreviations, but it's called NTW-CG, exploring DLT-based opportunities and initiatives on how they can relate to a digital euro. Now, again, remember all that testing that Quant network did in that regard. So you have the digital pound, you have the digital euro. We already confirmed that. You have everything from LaxChain. By the way, shout out to, Tokenizer. He had a recent post confirming some of these things, especially for LaxChain. Maybe next time I'm with you guys, I'll get more into the whole thing of Quant. Maybe not right next time, like if it's on Monday and so on. But the nice thing is that Tokenizer took a screenshot. He had a nice catch, top left corner of the person's laptop, confirmed the whole thing with Quant, but specifically with LaxChain, which we know that they're connected to. It says plan trial for 2024 involves interoperability work in the testing of DLT-based infrastructure solutions and, of course, use cases. Look at this for a second. Here's a highlight. Next step is interoperability between different platforms, often built on different protocols. Right. Some people feel as though that, well, I thought Quant was already, interoperable with all this stuff. Again, this is a blast from the past. Look at this. One important interoperability development was that R3, like we talked about yesterday with the XDC coverage, R3 at Hara, Finality, HQLAX, did a couple of videos on that, launched the Harmonia Lab, which is to work on cross-chain atomic settlements and standardization. And yes, oh, by the way, the whole thing of institutional swaps. All right, a little bit more about this. Let's get back to the whole thing of Corda. Corda-based Fentium platform, proving cross-chain capability, having undertaken a test intraday FX swap, like I mentioned before, with Ethereum-based Finality in late 2022. So when you see this guy who's now with the Quant network, it's all kind of coming towards the bigger picture of when people say, I still don't understand why, Gilbert Veridian basically chose some of these people from Ethereum. Now you're starting to have a better understanding of how this is all coming into fruition. At least I am. Increasing competition between settlement solutions and their tech runs a risk of market fragmentation. Look at this for a second. Risk of a market fragmentation without sufficient focus on interoperability and shared standards in 2024. What about some of the working groups that are part of all this? Again, when we talk about Quant, you got to keep in mind there's working groups for everything. And that's why I point out all those things for Japan. I think at some point, in the future, if JASMY wants to take it to the next level as far as scalability, interoperability, all this stuff, they got to have the working groups. And the ISO TC 307, right, standard has multiple working groups to get the job done, especially when it comes to AI, like we discovered, and a few other things. Pentium is a settlement agnostic execution venue and can integrate with multiple settlement avenues, allowing client banks to solve their funding needs. Their funding needs. Don't ever dismiss any of this stuff. Am I saying for you to become a Quant Maxi? No. But again, I like being diversified. Why? Because, it's just kind of like hitting a jackpot, for instance, or going to a casino, you get that. Some people call it the one-armed bandit, where you want to call it. But, there's progressive slots. Some particular ones are going to hit at a certain time, and other ones, will be much later, whatever the case be. I recognize this statement where it states that, multiple settlement avenues allowing client banks to solve their funding needs more efficiency with less friction. And basically speaking, this whole thing of the ability to offer banks the ability to trade intraday FX swaps and intraday repo with each other. But come on, guys, let's just face it. I mean, multiple settlement avenues or instant settlement avenues, it's definitely worth pointing out. All right. In conclusion, before we kick it into my own conclusion for my notes, I do want to play at least a little video for you guys because we didn't have any video tonight. This is good stuff. This comes from constructiontrader.eth. Been following him for a while. Very good content creator. This is going to pound it home even that much more when it comes to the institutions. Listen to this for a second. He says, listen to the Q&T language used here at the HKMI or MA Bank of International Settlements high-level conference. We need new financial architecture, and we need the new unified layer which assets ride on. Yes. And what would that be? We already know what that is. Overledger. So this is 2.5 minutes. Listen to the message here, and especially if you are a Q&T holder. And if you're not a Q&T holder, that's okay too. If anything, this will be educational for you. But open your eyes to this. Be open-minded, and think about what's mentioned here. I think it's pretty big. Here we go.
The problem with scaling is that they are still in multiple networks. You don't have a unified ledger. The BIS has spoken about this. Augustine, when he was in Singapore, spoke about this. Should we think of a new financial architecture? If it's going to be tokenized, then can we have a layer of a unified ledger into which these assets can ride on? It's, I think, a very powerful concept, I think worth exploring. Will it work? I don't know. But like all good experiments and innovation, I think it's worth a try because the payoffs are huge. The International Monetary Fund is thinking about the same. And together with a group of about half a dozen banks, the MAS has announced a similar, we call it Global Layer 1 framework. And one of the things that this is supposed to achieve is that you can, through the use of smart contracts, build in regulatory and policy requirements onto the platform. So you have regulatory compliance by design. Today, most regulatory compliance is ex post. You build the system, you transact, and then you check for compliance. But through smart contracts, you can build in policy requirements, you can build in capital control requirements, you can build in AML and other regulatory requirements into the contract itself that governs this chain. So if you can build a global layer like that, that will be the ultimate global public good for the financial system of the future. Is it possible? I think technologically it is possible. I think it's a question of achieving harmony across jurisdictions in terms of the design elements and the governance structures for these things. And I think that's something that is worthwhile pursuing, and many of us are pursuing that.
Right. In fact, just to share that we've been piloting with our tokenized bond for the government. And one thing is, if you really want to scale that up, you need global standards, you need global platforms. What we're seeing now is almost like walled gardens. with platforms that's operated by different firms and they're not interoperable. And if you really want the tokenized asset world to take off, I thought one comment that we received is that can we have some kind of industry standard so that everybody complies with that, so that all these platforms become interoperable and it becomes one big marketplace.
If you've been paying attention to Quant, like many of us have been for a couple years now, did that gentleman on the far left literally say verbatim everything that Gilbert Verdian has been preaching about for the last 4+ years? Yes. Walled gardens. How many times did he mention that? Interoperability, obviously. But what about this, guys? Remember how we talked about that? You know, some people said, man, you did like a lecture on it. The GL1, the global layer 1. You know, see what you want. We talk about, for instance, you know, various different projects. This one has a, you know, there's this layer 1, there's this layer 2, there's, you know, like Polkadot layer 0 for crying out loud. But what about Quant network, a global layer 1 solution? That sounds absolutely crazy, and one that's connected to the big institutions and so on. And then another gentleman, I think it was before the guy on the far left was talking, mentions specifically about how you're going to have a tremendous amount, not word for word, but you know, a lot of money that's going to be made on these platforms. I don't know, you know, when you look at the bigger picture and you see people, the way they're talking, you know, literally using word for word what Gilbert Verdian has been talking about without violating an NDA, that says Quant all over it. You know, again, we were always going to look more into all this stuff, but in conclusion, I want to share some notes with you guys. So I'm going to put the branding back on. So basically, it's like this. Remember how we talked about Zapier from the Quant Network site? Just in case if you missed it, I'll share this with you right now. So it is in regards to this right here. Okay. Zapier, OutSystems. How to use Zapier and Overledger to trigger actions based on what? DLT activity. At the end of the day, it's all about utility in motion, right? So my thing is this. What I want to point out for you guys is, why is Zapier and Overledger specifically to trigger actions based on DLT activity so significant, other than you know, the obvious utility in motion? Well, keep in mind this, because I always talk about this when it comes to JASMY, and that is democratization, specifically when it comes to data. But what about democratization of what, guys? Blockchain. Do I not have your attention on that one too? Listen to this. This is good stuff, even if you're not a QNT holder. So democratization of blockchain, no code automation, Zapier's no code platform makes it easy for anyone, right? Anybody out there, regardless of their coding skills, to create automated workflows triggered by DLT activity. What is something that we know that is in common with that? Overledger, attracting devs to build with only what, guys? 3 lines of code, like Gilbert Verdian and Martin Hargreaves have basically mentioned. Create automated workflows triggered by, of course, DLT activity. Opens up the possibility for blockchain to, of course, a wider audience. And guys, this is the whole bigger picture. You know, at the end of the day, if we're invested in this stuff, we need to see more of a wider audience, mass adoption, and so on. And this does, in fact, include businesses and individuals who wouldn't have considered it, before. Because want to know something? People at the end of the day don't necessarily want to take a bunch of courses and learn coding, you know, C#, C++, whatever, Python, JavaScript, whatever the case be, right? A lot of these guys already have this, you know, under their belt, part of their knowledge tank. But you want to know something? They come over and find out, you know, hey, Overledger has, or Quant Network has this with Overledger, or like I was talking about earlier, Stellar has this with Sorbonne. So you got to also keep in mind, Zapier is going to reduce development complexity, how users themselves can avoid the complexities of writing code, to interact with specific blockchains. That's very cool because if anything, it enables them to focus on what needs to be done. Remember how Gilbert Verdian was talking about, hey, we can help your particular business or project and so on get things done a lot more faster, more efficient. And by doing so, that's going to cut your costs down on your overhead, on your budget significantly. Lowers the barrier to entry, of course, for building DLT-powered applications and streamlines development processes. Again, focusing on what needs to be built instead of focusing on, well, we have this, got to make it compatible with that, yada, yada, right? And all the bugs that come with it. I'm not going to talk your ear off about enhancing interoperability because let's face it, we've been talking about interoperability for the longest time. But one thing I do want to talk about is the overall significance of Zapier and specifically Overledger, because again, that's one of the hot topics of tonight. So you got to keep in mind this ability to simplify and expand the use of DLTs. By making blockchain more accessible and enabling richer automation, Zapier with Overledger is going to pave the way for more efficient and interconnected future, with DLT playing, of course, a central role with that. And I like that. I like hearing about that. I love reading about that. I think it's the path forward that we all need. So basically, there's 3 points I want you all to consider in closing before we wrap things up for the night. This specific integration, if you weren't aware of it, does in fact open the doors for innovative use cases across various industries. Not just various industries, but many industries. It's going to go from the whole concept of triggering loyalty rewards and supply chains to automatically sending insurance payouts after certain events have happened on blockchain. Number 2, the combination of Zapier's vast ecosystem and Overledger's DLT expertise positions this solution as a potential leader in the DLT automation space. Hence the reference in the video, and shout out again to constructiontrader.eth because we confirmed this in the past with our own deep dive here at Maximus Crypto. And that is the whole thing of RLN and especially the whole thing of the global layer 1. Quant is behind it all. Number 3, please consider this. Actually, back to number 2. The combination of Zapier's vast ecosystem and Overledger's DLT expertise positions the solution as a potential leader. I just stated that, sorry. The last part of my note, number 3, sorry. It's important to note that security and trust will be crucial concerns in this area. Users basically should be careful to evaluate the security practices of both platforms, of course, before utilizing them. But if anything, they don't have to waste so much time studying new code because it's so easy to build on the platform. You already have the interoperability. You already have all these things with the APIs. And it's not just APIs. Overledger itself is so much more to, the overall broader scheme of things. I think this is big. And if anything, we'll continue to follow more about the thing with Zapier. I got to catch up on a lot of stuff that Quant Papa has, dropped within the last 3 weeks. But that one definitely caught my eye because it was recent. And if anything, I know you guys appreciate some of the more recent news. Last, I want to also point this out. I forgot to include it. There's this thing about real-time responsiveness, the ability to instantly trigger, listen to this, actions based on DLT activity enables real-time responsiveness in workflows. That is data, or I should say, that is utility in motion. It can be crucial for applications in finance, supply chain management, and other areas where speed and accuracy are critical. How so? Overledger enabling, but also teaming up with other particular platforms. It's just like a big, giant conglomerate ecosystem for institutions, kind of like what we shared with you before. Mike Cornwell showed you guys that chart where it shows, for instance, Quant and Overledger at the middle of everything. Yeah, it literally is.